Wait for it, and we're live. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans, it's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just a couple of nerdy veterans and one chaos coordinator geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. We are the podcast that puts the fun in dysfunction. So without further ado, we're going to let our guest, Mr. Parker Newman, introduce himself to our listeners and viewers at home.
Yeah, hey, thanks, JR. Thanks for having me on the show. It's really cool.
So you are obviously a comic creator. How did you get into that?
Honestly, growing up, I've always been a big comic book fan, and I think growing up when you're from 8 to 10, you're mostly reading the weekly adventures of Spider-Man, and then for me, it was really from when I was 12 years old when I read Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller. It just completely blew my mind because I never knew comics could do that, like what it was doing. And even at 12, I just didn't know, you can't appreciate Dark Knight Returns to its full extent, but you're still able, I would say, to understand oh, this is really different. And it kind of just snowballed from that to I always had that interest, always had that lingering dream to oh, maybe one day I'll make a comic or a graphic novel. And as I got further on and then started a career, which I'm still in commercial videography, I found myself just still having that lingering dream of, oh, maybe I should do a graphic novel or something. And then finally, I went to a comic book convention where I just convinced myself I'm going to do this, and then wrote a script that was essentially actually based off a screenplay I wrote during college a few years back, and then wrote the script, got connected to an artist via social media, and then started shopping. Honestly, we created the first issue, so 20 pages. And started shopping that around to different publishers, independent, small press. And long story short, finally got connected to Blood Moon Comics, and which has mostly known for publishing horror comics and whatnot. And got connected to them, and we've made I think what's going to be a really awesome collaboration with them. And I'm so happy for Blood Moon to give me and the entire City of Demons team this opportunity to make something which I truly think is going to be really special.
Nice. Now, we normally do also a series of interviews that we call our Small Press Radio Hour. Mm-hmm. And so we'll have to reach out to you after the show and get your publisher on to come and pimp their publishing house.
Yeah, definitely.
It's always fun to, obviously, everyone complains about the big, booksellers, comic booksellers. I don't like what they're doing with my ideal property. And then you end up with people that decide, hey, I'm going to take my ball and go home. I'm going to do my own thing because I don't like what they're doing to my favorite thing as a kid. And, it spawns all kinds of creative stuff.
Yeah.
If you're willing to complain that they destroyed your property, and we've railed against every nerd has about Star Wars, Star Trek, insert property, how they're ruining it, because it's they want to make it theirs instead of honoring where it came from. For people that complain about that, we kind of feel like we're obligated to highlight companies that are doing that. So the small presses, the small booksellers. So we decided to put our money where our mouth is and introduce them to our listeners who are, readers and, consumers of product.
Well, yeah, I'm happy you mentioned that because, oh my gosh, you mentioned Star Wars, Indiana Jones. That was the last movie was terrible. But there's a lot of especially when it comes to these big market comic book companies. So take a Marvel, I love Spider-Man. If you've read even the more recent Spider-Man comics, it's bad. It's just bad. They just don't want to age up the character at all. He's still what I'm saying? There's just nothing fresh to bring you with it. And I think, and I want to hear your opinion because whether or not you agree, I feel like a lot of companies get mad, when they try to take on these big brands that people grew up with, and it's they get mad because or when they see the fans get mad at something, they're oh, we just don't like it to change. No, we just don't like it when it's done poorly. We just like good stories. And so if you're changing something, but it's in the in the context of a good story or something, people are going to love it. Like,
so I'll give you an example. So there's two ways to do it. One, when you're doing a reboot or a reimagining, you're taking the original idea, but it's not a shot-for-shot copy, so you can make changes.
Right.
Generally, people might complain about the changes, but they understand that you're reinventing the product. So I'll give you, for instance, I quote ad nauseum, but making Starbuck a woman in Battlestar Galactica, the redoing of it.
Oh, yeah.
I actually thought that was well done because the love story between her and the youngest Adama son who died, plot twist, that was episode 1. But her relationship was, he was the son of famous pilots, the brothers, the dads, all that. He's not a good pilot. She passes him anyway because they're dating, and which was totally inappropriate to date your student, but they cover that too. But she passes him so he can make his dad proud, thinking, well, he's never actually going to have to fly, and then he dies in an accident. So now that dynamic with her and the family, it makes sense to me. Like, they sold it.
Right.
It made the change mean something. And then other times it's like, we must support the message, whatever the message is. And then you just insert any changes. And for that, it feels like if you feel like we need more representation, and I don't have a problem with that at certain level, then make new characters, and I'm there for the ride. But like Thor canonically, for instance, was a man, and he was white, and he was Norse. Like, you can bring in other characters. I'm totally okay with that. But try to pretend he was something else for the sake of your agenda. To me, it's lazy writing, and I don't like it.
Well, it's lazy and it's cowardice, because with these, and I put most of the blame just after the company started even greenlighting this stuff, that it's cowardice because what they're really saying is they don't believe that a new character, that's whatever group they want to represent, that a new character will sell well. So in order for that character to sell well, they believe that in order for a character like that to sell well, they have to tie it to some pre-existing brand or property,
and you could do that by introducing new characters.
Exactly, but the way they're doing it by just completely replacing them, that they're not confident in it at all. So it's just
in the multiverse with some of the comic companies, like that to me is a lazy out. You can always reboot because we just pull them from another dimension. Having that be an integral point of the plot, I don't necessarily have a problem with that. If it's just your lazy excuse to get whatever you want for the character, that I don't like.
Well, if message takes precedence over character, then you've automatically lost.
Yeah, so there's two reasons that happens. One, from an IP perspective, if it's an existing IP and you're writing for it, you don't have creative claim to it. It's a work for hire, essentially, which means you don't get subsidiary rights. So the toys, the comic, or the toys, the lunchboxes, at all. But if it's a new comic book character and it sells well, then the company has to share, right? Because you created this for them. So that's part of it. But we recently did an interview that was talking about Asian-inspired fantasy as an example. And in preparing for that, you look at some of these other cultures, and I'm remembering stories I forgot from way back in World Civilizations in high school. And you realize, like, you don't have to reinvent the wheel with existing characters to find a deep, like, well of awesome concepts and ideas and people that existed in other cultures that would make kick-ass characters in a comic book. I mean, Norse is in Odin and Thor and all that. They're not the only pantheon of gods out there that was cool.
Right.
And so they just ignore it and they go back to what's comfortable, I think. And it hurts the story overall.
Well, it makes you forget about the story, which is the problem. So it's a really awkward place. And what I get, what I'm more concerned by on a greater level is the reception to those type of events and those type of stories is almost never positive at all, even by fan reception or even just financially. Like, the sales numbers are just never that good. But yet these companies are still shoving them out ad nauseum, and it's like, so it's almost like they're just going to wait us out. Like you're going to accept this no matter what. It's like it's really bizarre. I don't know any other time that's been like this.
It's because the people they hire to manage the companies and to shepherd the new products don't like the original, so they're going to change it. Yeah. And they, in trying to expand their audience, which all businesses want to do, expand your reach, they forget who their existing customers are, and then they piss those people off, so they lose the existing customer base, and they don't gain the new customer base, because even if you cater to them exclusively, the people that complain the loudest oftentimes won't read the comic, won't watch the movie anyway. And if they do, they're going to pirate it. And so, like, even if you give them exactly what the new audience wants, the chances of it being profitable are just slim to none.
Yeah. Well, they always, in my opinion, take a very super narrow-minded way of looking at gaining a new audience or expanding their audience. And it's like so you take like a property that, you know, maybe has an older demographic, and you want to say, okay, we want to get young kids in on this. Well, the way you do that, and again, quality. You create good stories that are going to be intriguing, that are going to, you know, intrigue young readers to pick it up. You do not do this by catering to whatever some PR group has sent you. Like, ooh, young people really like X. What I don't know. Like, you read a comic, and it'll be like, did I just read a comic about like that went on 40 pages talking about like a Guardians of the Galaxy book talking about climate change? Like, what is going on? It's the same problem where they think it's always the case. Going to a younger audience, they have to be more topical. And all you're doing is almost embarrassing yourself, because they never broach the topic with any sort of subtlety. It's not particularly clever whenever they touch on any sort of, like, you know, topical subject. I just find it incredibly embarrassing, and it's very, just lacks any creativity, and I don't get it. I just don't get it. Where, you know, you go back to, like, I almost wish we could go back to like the comics, like some of the goofy stuff of going on like the 60s or like the 50s of comics, because that stuff is just so goofy, and it was just complete creativity, just complete fun. Like, part of me is like, oh, I kind of miss that kind of stuff.
I think part of it is they don't know the young audience. They
don't. No, not at all.
They think they're in a different place because a small minority is. Mm-hmm. Insert whatever political left, right, or the other, because both sides do it in that respect. Or they don't realize that if they go too niche, then their existing audience has other places to go now, because you have people that are doing their own comics outside of whatever the big companies are, or books that are outside of Tor and Penguin and all the places, right?
Yeah.
So because there's competition, like, the audience is more discerning now than they used to be. Like, they used to, you will take it and like it because there was nothing else.
Yeah.
Now there's a lot else. And so you're competing not only against new products that are being put out by the independent markets or small press markets, but you're also competing against the existing stuff that was put out 20 years ago, because when you give people crap, they're like, well, I'm just going to go back to what I know was safe, and I'll read the comics I bought in 1980 or whatever, you know?
Oh, yeah. Well, no, you're 1,000% correct. It's, and like again, that's the way it happened to me. Like, I struggle to fairly criticize the current, like, Amazing Spider-Man run, or the past 5, because I don't know how much of it, and because it kind of feels like it when you read it, how much is just so corporate mandated. But it's been so poor. I just go back to read like the old, you know, Brian Michael Bendis Ultimate Spider-Man comics. And but that's only one property, and it's like that for so much else. But yeah, you're seeing that across all waves of media, you know, like, I know you mentioned Star Wars. I'll just say that, like, you know, the current Star Wars sequel trilogy, even this newer Star Wars shows, it's like, why am I watching this? I'll just go rewatch the, you know, original trilogy for like the 100th time, or I'll even watch like part of the prequel trilogy again. Like, I don't know, but I want to hear you say, but like, this is very unique. I think we haven't been in a place like this with pop culture, I don't think, ever.
No, I don't think so either. And I also think that some of these companies are like this, because we have mega corporations, and I'm not an anti-corporation, I'm not anti-rich people. I want to be rich people. But like, I think at some level they buy these book companies and these media properties, the pop culture stuff, and for them it's a tax write-off. They buy it, it doesn't make money, and then they're able to, you know, hide profits over here with losses over here, and you know, it's just a write-off.
Well, and it's even like that lack of, there's a disconnect it took completely. Like even at the film level, where I think George Lucas was asked, he's like, "Oh, would Star Wars get made nowadays?" He's like, "Well, no." He's like, and it was even crazy difficult. He was like, to get that movie made back then. He's like, but back then, movie studios were headed by film people, by people who had experience in the film industry. A lot of these guys, even the executives, have worked on film sets before, were to some extent, a filmmaker themselves. And nowadays, I mean, again, the head of these companies, like you mentioned, are just operated by giant conglomerates, and they could care less. Because, like you said, at the end of the day, if it fails, it's a tax write-off. And, it's just no soul. It's just no soul.
Absolutely. But again, I mean, are you familiar with the YouTube channel Dust?
No.
So I've talked about them before, but basically they're a small independent film creation company that does sci-fi and fantasy, mostly sci-fi, and they do short films. And that stuff some of that has got more compelling plots than anything that's coming out of Hollywood, and they're doing it on like shoestring budgets for the fun of it. Yeah. I mean, obviously they're making money now through ads and whatnot, but those people all have day jobs too, right?
Yeah.
And so, but the quality they're able to put out with the technology that's available compared to what a home movie back then looked more like Blair Witch Project and less like, feature film. Nowadays, from a quality standpoint, you can't always tell the difference unless they're going for a retro feel.
Yeah. Nowadays, again, the technology with that is been a big blessing. Like there's never been more tools, even free tools, at anyone's hands creatively than ever before. And that's really lessened any potential skill gap that, like used to be before, to make a big budget movie, you needed, or not big budget, but to make a movie, like a professional movie, you would have to, you would have to be almost part of the studio system, the big Hollywood studio system. And nowadays with prosumer cameras and all this stuff, it's getting just so much easier. And so the divide is getting less and less. And if you're one of these major media corporations, you're terrified of that because, I'm sure a big problem with modern day Hollywood, especially, is that a lot of these big blockbusters, all they're doing is spend on big blockbusters. But anyway, these big blockbusters are way too expensive. In what world is an Indiana Jones movie, just production budget, not even considering marketing, in what world is should an Indiana Jones movie be $300 million to make? It's like, what? Oh my gosh. And
yeah, so if we keep this up, though, we might have to label this "Old Man Shakes Fist at the Sky" for the episode. But I'm definitely there. I think they just lost their audience, and so instead, people are just saying, "Well, I'll just take my ball and go home," and they're either making it themselves or they're watching other people do it, and so that's going to change the game, I think, forever. I just don't think there's any going back on this. So. But all right, before we get too far afield, we spent the first 20 minutes railing at the world, kids these days and all that. But we're going to do the religion question. Are you ready for this?
Yeah.
All right, Star Wars, Star Trek, or Firefly?
Star Wars.
Okay, why do you like Star Wars?
Well, less so now. I hate to say it. I've almost gone. I grew up a humongous Star Wars fan, but now I'm just more apathetic. Yeah, and that's so sad. When the Acolyte, I haven't even seen the show, but when it was announced, the trailer was released, I just shrugged. I just didn't care, and that's crazy because 5 years ago, or even when I was in high school, when the Force Awakens came out, had you told me there was going to be a live action Star Wars show, I would have freaked out. I'd be like, oh my gosh! But now it's just I just don't care. I picked Star Wars because I've seen all the movies, begrudgingly. Star Trek never caught my interest, and
Star Trek was too utopian for me.
Yeah, it was way too utopian, and it was kind of took out the interest. I don't know. It just because of that, I just wasn't as interested, and Firefly. I don't know. It's just I didn't grow up with it. It's something I found out later, and so yeah, just I have more nostalgia for Star Wars, but I went from being a super fan to being very apathetic towards it. So
yeah, I grew up reading the what they call expanded lore.
oh, now they call it the expanded, or what do they call it? What's it called? Legends. Now it's called
Legends. There we go.
Oh, so stupid.
It's to a point, like I get why they had to do that, right?
Right.
Because George Lucas said yes to everything.
Yeah, George Lucas has no one but himself to blame. Let's be clear.
Yeah, so you would say yes to everything, and we know it takes 12 days to get from Planet 1 to Planet 2. It's a known thing.
Right.
You get one series, the book's approved, they're on Planet 1 on day 1, and then the next series on day 4, the events of that book happen on Planet 2. Well, there was no way for them to get there. You broke in canon. So at some level, in order to create a linear canon, because with the internet now, people can check that. Like, oh, that's... So I get why you would have had to do that, but you could have pulled the books, re-released them with new covers, fix the canon issue, and start introducing them and get relaunches of existing books and made money off them twice.
But that would take time. And
Disney it would take a willingness to do it, but like they could have. Or they could have picked and choose what they liked. I mean, like, you can't beat Republic Commando, Rogue Squadron, you know, like those books, like they were iconic.
Oh, even the
ones, was it Thrawn?
The Thrawn trilogy is amazing. Like, it's actually great. Like, oh my gosh.
But so they had to do it to a point, but they just didn't honor the source material, and they came at it with an agenda that wasn't Star Wars. Although, again, George Lucas did it to himself, and he cheerleaded for it every step of the way.
Well, and George Lucas, and yeah, that's the thing where people are like, because I see on the internet, people are like, oh, just let George Lucas make a new Star Wars movie, or make him have him be involved in some new Star Wars thing or whatever. I'm like, and you always hear the rumors of George Lucas not liking what Disney's doing with it, and the thing that annoyed me was you heard George Lucas was, quote, disappointed that Disney did not use any of his sequel trilogy ideas, Well, dude, that's your fault. like unless there was something in the contract that said we have to use your sequel trilogy ideas, unless that is in black and white, they're not going to do it. And why would you assume they're going to do it? So for him to be annoyed and kind of roll my eyes at him, well, you did sell it to them. It's just annoying. There's a really sad clip. I don't know if you've seen this on social media, where George Lucas's ex-wife, who edited the original trilogy, and amazing editor. She's won the Oscar for editing. She's considered the woman that saved Star Wars in the editing room. And anyway, she was interviewed and she talked about how George Lucas once said was I'm so proud of Star Wars. This is something no one can ever take away from me. And then and she got emotional. She got teary-eyed. She's and then he sold it. I was oh, dang. Oh, no.
Yeah, I don't, again, for me, it's not honoring the source material.
No.
And as a general rule, my stance on politics is, we've all got opinions. Nobody really cares. Nobody's going to be convinced on the internet, so why talk about it?
Yeah.
That's why I intentionally, on my social media, on my author stuff, it's all just memes and funny nonsense. But the only thing that's remotely political I do is veteran issues, right? And I don't even think that should be political. But I just don't want politics. I read, I watch, I consume content to escape the crappiness of the real world.
Right.
So the only politics I care about are the politics in the world I'm reading, right?
Right.
I don't want any of that. And even when I agree with the politics, I don't want it. The Doll books, what is it? Sword of Truth series. He got a little too preachy later in the series, and I had to stop. I'm I don't even disagree necessarily with his politics, the libertarian stuff, but it's just got so heavy-handed. I'm is this a book, or are you writing a political treatise?
Well, and yeah, exactly. So in almost all media, you could probably point to, oh, well, the author or the creator or director, whatever, is revealing some political thing. And even I played a video game called Disco Elysium.
Okay.
Extremely political. The whole, it's a detective murder mystery, but it's very political. But they do it with so much subtlety, and they do it through the story in such a natural way to where you honestly don't realize exactly, how topical it is until you really like sit down and you think like, oh yeah, this is actually a stand-in for this and that and this. So there's taste, it all comes down to taste, like or like it's like there's ways to do it. If you want to talk about whatever political issue, there are ways to do it that can still do not break immersion for an audience, again, one of my favorite movies of all time, and I'm right there with you, but one of my favorite movies of all time is Children of Men, which talks about like I think off the top of my head like two very specific political issues, but you're not really thinking about that as you watch it. You're just more enjoying the movie. Even think like The Dark Knight. The Dark Knight is an amazing movie. The Dark Knight is really about post 9/11 America and like the Patriot Act and about terrorism. But when you're watching it, you're thinking about like, oh, this is such a gripping, crime drama. But yeah, there's all those kind of fictional works where I think if you handle your political topics in a way that's natural for the story at hand, then I think you're going to be mostly fine. But yeah, what we're getting now is just in your face, just BS. Like, oh my gosh, like what was it? It was, and we talked about Star Wars too much, but there was remember there was an animal rights thing in Star Wars, like the Last Jedi that released that horse thing, and it goes like, oh, was it worth it? And she's like, no, now it's worth it. It's like, wait, did I watch an animal rights message in my Star Wars movie? Like, what?
Yeah, it's the other thing you got to understand is like literature, games, movies, generally speaking, they're timeless. So you could, in theory, read this book in 100 years, and you have to ask yourself, if you put all modern politics, how will that resonate with someone who reads it 20 years from now who doesn't know what the current thing is? Mm-hmm. And so there's a danger in going to modern world.
Yeah, too specific with your messaging.
It's like 50 years from now, nobody, you did your rant against Trump or Biden. I don't care which side you're picking. If you wrote that in a book 50 years ago and nobody remembers who they are, they were just a footnote in their history class, will the story still resonate with them, or will they be like, what the hell are they talking about?
Well, yeah, it's like it's not particularly, in my opinion, good art if you have to do a whole history lesson to know what someone's talking about.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Yeah, but yeah. Oh, yeah.
All right. So. Go ahead.
No.
The next religion. So, because we're polytheistic here at the Blasters and Blades, Game of Thrones, Wheel of Time, or Chronicles of Narnia?
This is tough. Definitely not Wheel of Time. Dang it. In my heart, I want to say Game of Thrones, but it is so terribly. It kind of makes me pissed off to think about. Okay, I'll say Game of Thrones because of that. The prequel show is really actually pretty solid.
Okay.
Yeah, but the ending for the original Game of Thrones show was terrible. It was so bad.
Okay. All right, and one of the crying shames of adulthood is they stop asking this question, so we're bringing it back. What's your favorite dinosaur?
Velociraptor.
Okay, that's a very popular answer. I think it's because of
It's the only one I can name off the top of my head right now, outside of a T-Rex.
I think it's because it was also in Jurassic Park. I think is the other reason it's so popular.
Yeah,
I figure a lot of people's love of dinosaurs or knowledge is rooted in either Jurassic Park or Land Before Time.
No, 100% is.
It's cool though. Like we actually have had people answer like, well, I was never really into dinosaurs. This was my jam that I obsessed about, because we all had that one thing we were passionate about as kids.
Oh, yeah.
And that's really what we're harkening back to, is like, what was your jam when you were young? So for me, it really was dinosaurs. I'm a history nerd, so like I've always liked things that are old. So you can't get much older than dinosaurs.
Definitely not.
All right. And because we are civilized human beings here at the Blast from the Blades podcast, we are no longer knuckle-dragging troglodytes. Coffee or tea, and how do you take it?
Coffee, and I'll take it with just a little bit of creamer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's the middle of summer as we're recording this, or it feels like it's the middle. I don't know. It's July. Mm-hmm. And I've been on the Dunkin's iced coffee kick. And
yeah, it's awesome.
I love it. And I'm like, but I can't spend $5 every time I want a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Even for calories aren't that bad the way they make it. Like it's like 400 calories for 32 ounces of sweetness. Like that's a good trade-off for me. I can do that as a meal substitute for lunch. And but obviously you don't want to spend $5 a drink. So Stabby did the research for me. She's one of the co-hosts you haven't met.
Yeah.
And she's like, this is how you make it, and this is what you buy. So I've been making it at home now.
Oh, yes.
Now that there's endless on tap, so to speak, I'm like, I don't know if this is saving me calories because now I'm drinking twice as much, but it's so good.
It's the crazy thing about coffee. So back in summer when I was in college, I worked as a barista.
Me too.
You find out it's like, dude, like, and I go crazy because I literally did this yesterday. I hate going to coffee shops because you have to buy a coffee and the coffee's like $5 or $6. And you realize like, wait, how much does it actually take to make like a cup of coffee? It's like 40 cents. And it's like, wait, it's like the markup on it is absolutely crazy. And it's just like, oh, it blows my mind. And so now I'm conditioned because I like when I work virtually in my job, I like to go to coffee shops. But you're wasting the extra $6 every time you go, and so I'm just have to like conditioning myself to like, okay, I'm actually going to stay home and make myself like my own coffee. So, but yeah,
yeah, it's it can get a little pricey, and depending on what coffee shop you go to. Although I don't mind as much when I'm supporting a local business versus like the mega conglomerate companies, because I feel like and a lot of times you get better quality service and product too.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're comparing to like a Starbucks or something.
Yeah, but I mean, sometimes you're paying a little bit more because there is something to be said with the supply chain, the economy of size, and so when you're buying more, you can get it for cheaper, versus when you're a small, one-man coffee shop or whatever.
Right.
But you know that going in, that when you're supporting local companies, you might have to pay a little bit more. So I'll do that, and then just cut the amount of times I go out in half, so I could at least keep my money local. But I like to do that as a general rule, like support local companies. And I think that's all people should do that, no matter where they're at. Like there's something community building about that, right? Like you're giving back, and you're building a community instead of everything being so transient, I think. I'm originally from a small town in North Carolina, and shopping small business, it's at least growing up it was mostly small businesses, and now, and I'm sure there's a million reasons why this happens, but now almost downtowns, it's just so many of these major corporations have set up shop, and so, but for me it's like I feel more inclined just to go to the local one, just because I don't know. It's gonna sound like pretentious, but a moral, like I feel like it's my moral, duty to like support small business over any major corporation. Yeah, I get that. I don't think that's pretentious at all. So, all right. Before we dive into City of Demons, we're gonna pause for a moment while we shamelessly shill for the man, and then we're gonna jump right back.
Sounds good.
All right, so Nick's got to do a better job on his commercial. So for those that are listening, that was music with a bunch of the images from his various titles over at Apogee Comics. So we'll link to Apogee Comics, and you should all reach out and pester Nick and tell him to make a better commercial. He can do better. And with that, they can
I work in videography if he wants to reach out to me.
All right, so Nick, you can hire somebody. There's no excuse for bad commercials. Okay, so first, like, where did the idea? We're going to talk now from here on out about City of Demons. You mentioned that in the introduction that you got the idea when you were in college from a screenplay, but the idea, that was when you got the idea. Where did it come from? Do you remember at this point?
Oh gosh, so the idea, I think, came from, so right around when I started writing it was, with the Harvey Weinstein thing blew up. And shortly after that, the Epstein and the whole island thing blew up. And for me, it was like, you see how much like of that is tied into like, or allegedly is tied into the movie business at, at large today. And for me, just I'm a history buff, so I just was curious and did more research onto the history of Hollywood, and going far back as well, the comic takes place in the 1920s, so the silent movie era of Hollywood, and you find out that this kind of dark, malevolent stuff has been going on for ever since Hollywood's infancy. Since it was first becoming the hub for American pop culture, and that was something where I felt could be an interesting story to tackle, interesting themes to tackle. And then I just, by learning more about LA during that time, you also find out that I think as early as 1908, don't quote me, but 1918, I think, was the first black officer hired on the LAPD. And shortly after that was actually the first black female officer. And just this whole interesting history with the LAPD, you just learn these historical little tidbits. And I thought, honestly, at that time in college, I had an assignment coming up for a screenplay. So I was like, okay, let me just put something together, and I was able to create a story that I was then able to further refine all these years later. And the story to me was one where I wanted to examine characters' lives and very unique characters in that time period, how they really cope with it and really just maneuver their way through the very specific 1920s Hollywood. And one of those characters being Lucas Short, who is a black detective, was a former detective on the LAPD, and has to deal with all that has to deal with, that whole package of that race element, on top of dealing with the trauma, because he's also a World War I vet, of dealing with the trauma of World War I. And he teams up with another a PI named Lawrence K, who has just an emotionally, I don't want to spoil anything, but has a very dark, intriguing past that shapes who he is now in 1924. And he is a guy who I wrote as being my character profile, as being, he's out of time. He's a guy that would probably find himself more at home in the hippie movement of the 60s than anywhere in the 20s. He's a man out of time, kind of aimless. He's let his hair grow long, and he's a guy who's just so emotionally dejected from all that's going on. And I thought that dynamic of teaming up those two characters together, of guys that don't fit in to that kind of culture and that kind of atmosphere, would be very intriguing. And so the idea originally just came from the characters. And I hope anyone that reads the comic will see characters first before anything else. Character before plot. Character takes place over really the overarching mystery of the comic. And so, yeah, it was that idea. Is like, I want to take these characters that I think are really interesting, really fun, hopefully fun to read about, and just put them together in a very complex scenario to where we can explore themes that I think are very prevalent today, and themes that I think will just really grab people from the outset. I'm very confident in this. The comic's gotten great reviews, and yeah.
Okay. Now, is this what kind of comic? Well, first off, what would you say the age range is for people that are listening with their kids? Looking for the comic for the audience? What would you say the age range is? And since you mentioned Hollywood, we'll use their sort of
rating system.
Rating system, yeah.
Oh gosh, probably PG-13. The comic, so because I tried to mix our sort of era-specific dialogue with more of a modern flavor, and just to, make it go down easier for modern readers. The dialogue does not feature any cursing, because simply people in the 1920s did not really curse a whole lot. And so it does not feature any cursing. However, there's not a whole lot of violence, But you see I call it, you see the aftermath of violence, right? Because the story, and for those who don't know, obviously, so City of Demons, it follows two private detectives who are hired to track or uncover a serial killer who is targeting top mafia officials or top LA mafia officials. And these mafia officials are tied into the Hollywood system at large. And the person who's hired them is actually one of the heads of the mafia families being targeted. And so it's a journey through 1920s LA. And with that, the story does contain very dark themes, a very dark subject matter. So the story itself is very dark. But it's not, I don't think it's disturbing. Like, you're not going to see imagery that I would argue is going to, like, make you just super, nasty, feel nasty or whatever. The darkness is there for a reason. And I feel like for anybody, any parent, if you have a teenager, probably 15, 14, who's mature enough to take the material with the context of the situation, then I feel like they can probably easily handle this stuff. This is nothing super, super mature. It does deal with later on. This is probably a spoiler, but screw it. Human trafficking later on, and it does deal with that kind of subject matter. It does talk about rape. Does not show it, but it's definitely there as a subject. Murder, obviously, but it's all done with context and with taste, and so it's there for a purpose, not just to shock you. So, finally, answer your question. A hard PG-13. I would say a mature, like, if you're kid, your kid, 14 and up.
Okay, so what would you say? Is this a superhero story, a detective noir, Tracy? Was it Dick Tracy kind of story? Like, what? How would you genre class this?
Right. So it's a very much a detective noir, similar in tone, I would argue, to like a True Detective, the show on HBO, more in tone to a True Detective. Yeah, through and through, a detective noir. Yeah, not a superhero story at all. A lot of people, it was funny, some publishers, when I pitched them City of Demons, they just saw the name and thought, oh, demons. And they were like, oh, yeah, demons. And I'm like, no, that's like, it's a metaphor. It has nothing to do with, like, at least physical demons. It has to do more with, I think we could argue, like a demonic sort of culture or demonic, things taking place. But it's a detective noir story where that, as you go through the story, it's really, you're learning more so the motivation behind the killings than really who's doing the killings themselves. And that starts to become the focus. I think it's a detective noir, yes, but it's a detective noir with a unique spin to the genre, to the way it's told, where there's not a whole lot of thought bubbles. So there's not going to be a lot of, internal monologuing, which to be honest with you personally, I find it kind of annoying at times with a lot of noir stories. It takes a very cinematic approach to its visualization, to its paneling, and it's fast-paced. It's, again, I think people are going to love the characters in this. And, yeah.
All right, before we get deeper in, we're going to show this art so you can tell us, like, who did your art, where did all this come from, and then as you talk about this one, we'll move to the next. And
yeah, definitely. So this is actually a variant cover of, I believe, issue 2, and it's a variant cover that actually I illustrated with charcoal. In my spare time, sometimes I do charcoal art, and so this was something I created that I think is just very moody, and I think it speaks to the tone. It's more of a tone. I hate to use it like a tone poem kind of piece, but yeah.
Okay. And this one, you did all the black and white cover variants, you said. So what about this one?
This one is a variant for issue 1. Again, it's more of this one is all the charcoal ones, to be honest with you, are going to be more tone poems. This one's another tone poem where it's a kind of a battered, I try to go for like a visually kind of like sleek, almost beautiful looking face that has a black eye, that has, these bandages on it. And so, which I think speaks to, again, this one is more just a pure metaphor for Hollywood in the story itself. It has like this glamorous front, right, that actually is all beaded and bruised. And this actually is modeled after was used as a model for a character that's going to be featured in issue 3. So this face, to those who will read the series, you'll see this face again in issue 3.
Okay. What about this one?
This one is based off of this is similar kind of message as the previous one. It's kind of this, glamorous look of a woman, and it's modeled after a lot of the posing of 1920s. Oh gosh, I forget the name for the woman, but 1920s sort of LA stars,
You talk about the flapper look?
Yes. And so I saw a lot of pictures with this kind of like model, like kind of like, glancing a little bit over her shoulder, and a lot of this very harsh directional lighting. And so I just took it, and what I'm trying to do is, like, again, similar to the last one, you kind of contrast and mix together chaos and like the internal chaos with an outward sort of beauty.
Okay. All right, we got one more of the variant covers, then we'll sample some of the art. Oh, this one is...
That's just a pure cover. So
that's a cover. Okay, I like this one. It's got the iconic martini.
Yeah, so this one is our official cover for issue 3. And issue 3 is called The Playboy. The Playboy, and you learned this by like issue 2, which is the larger mystery. So The Playboy, and this is again illustrated by Kingsley, our regular artist on the series. And this is showcasing Marcus Sullivan, who's the new head of the Sullivan crime family after his father was murdered by the series serial killer. And so he puts up this front of this sort of like kind of like Batman, I guess, puts up this front of a Playboy to make his enemies of the rival crime family and the enemies inside his own family sort of vulnerable, and they underestimate him because of that.
Okay. I dig the art. So this is one of the sample art pieces.
Yeah. This is from the second page of the whole series.
I love this. The World War I, the gas cloud following them.
Yeah.
Bodies on the ground. I'm digging it.
Yeah, we love this. I wrote this and I shared a few sample images, I believe, to Kingsley. And the way he was able to incorporate it, I just love it. Like, Kingsley was great because I looked over like JR, maybe like hundreds of artists, and a lot of them, a lot of artists that had done other like noir work before. But Kingsley, I looked at his stuff, and Kingsley had mostly done a lot of like his own superhero stuff. And what I thought he'd be a great pick was because there's such a dynamism with his movement, and he's so expressive with his characters because he's not going for realism at such a super detailed level. He's going like it's detailed enough to where you can understand the character's feelings, and like even just that, like the face, like, his characters are so expressive. It's great, and I think he's fantastic. He's an absolutely fantastic artist to work with. I love him.
Yeah, I really like it, and the details are enough because you were able to give us the high resolution.
And it's not. And what I also love about it, it's black and white, obviously, but it's not just black and white. Like it's he puts on this gray. I don't know, like almost this grayscale texture to it. So the pictures feel very textured. It's fantastic.
Very colorblind friendly when it's black and white.
Oh, are you colorblind?
Yeah.
Oh, hey, perfect. So,
yeah, I like this one too, although it's got a different vibe to it. I'm guessing this is set in the modern, 1920s, whereas the previous panel was World War I.
Right, and this one, I showed you the images without lettering on it. This one right here is this is the inciting incident in issue 1, which leads to a very what everyone has told me has led to a very, in a good way, surprising ending. So I just love again his dynamism with his movement. The Kingsley's movement is fantastic.
Yeah, and you got so much cool, like everything was designed in the 1920s still for a visual aesthetic too. So you had like the cars that were just sexy, like there's just the iconic roadsters, the suicide doors, and for The sensors over there, YouTube listening, that's just what they call it because they open the opposite direction they do now. So the ability to fall out of your vehicle, because instead of opening where the wind will hold the door closed, they open the opposite direction. So if it comes unlatched, now the wind is holding the door open, and sometimes if you're fast enough, it will take it off. And the ability to potentially fall out of your own vehicle, instigating suicide doors.
And I want people to know that the details that we took to 1920s LA was a lot. Like, it was a lot of research. And again, I love history, so I was all for it. Because a lot of things people said was, "Oh no, black detective in that time. Like, it's like fine to be fictional, but I don't know if that's realistic." Like, no, in 1918 there was the first black officer, and so like that's the impetus to even have the idea in the first place. But yeah, it's yeah, again, this one is one of my favorite layouts that Kingsley and I were able to come up with. This is the murder scene, the first murder scene that Lawrence Kay, the private detective in the fedora, comes across. And so to all the people watching, they see the Matchbox, the Bright Star Men's Club, and that star tattoo on the girl's neck are just the first sort of clues to the larger mystery at hand. And yeah, but I love the layout of this page, and it's just because here's the deal: like most guys who I'd seen draw noir comics, like even just the way the panels are laid out dynamically, and the girl, at the bottom of at the end of the page, how the panels almost overlapping her head. No other artist I saw who had done noir work had even thought of doing that, because Kingsley has come from doing sort of action-oriented superhero comics. He comes with that mindset and with that sort of that feel, and that's what I really loved, because in the noir detective stories, there's a lot of talking. There's a lot of interviewing, and I want someone to add a lot of just energy in a lot of these more dialogue-heavy scenes, and Kingsley does it in spades, and so it's awesome.
Now, did you feel like you would potentially get blowback for not using the iconic? Listen here, see, we have a game.
No, I don't think because I didn't care. I was like, I think that to an extent that's almost trying too hard, to where it does the opposite of what you want it to do. It takes people out of it because it feels like, oh, this guy's just he's trying. He's almost trying too hard. And this page right here is it's actually the previous page to the one you just showed, and this is Lawrence walking into the crime scene. And I love Kingsley's lighting here. We talked a lot about noir lighting, and on my scripts, which I don't know if other comic scripts do this necessarily, but when I talk to Kingsley and I send him my scripts and the page layouts, I send him pictures or still frames from other like 1940s sort of noir movies, showing him the lighting effects I want from other comics, like Sin City. Be like, hey, I like this light effect. Let's try to mimic it, do some here. And even with this room, JR, I did research on sort of like 5-star hotel kind of looking bedrooms, because this isn't a motel or sorry, a hotel. And I looked up. I was like, okay, this is like 5 images of the hotel. Let's see if we can do like a hybrid of all of these. And so again, detail oriented is super important in doing a period piece. But even the chandelier, that was from a reference photo. Yeah.
Nice. And the wallpaper is very, that creates the feel of the inset window.
Kingsley's the man. It's again, the scripts and if I can almost brag, are super, super detailed. And I love this. So this is a detective that the rival crime family has beaten up in order to silence him, or in order to, I guess, encourage him to stop his investigation. And again, what's really interesting, when I'm pitching this story, JR, I've said this story is True Detective meets Game of Thrones. And what I mean by that is you have 2 rival crime families at the center of this mystery, the Boyles and the Sullivans. The Sullivans are a newer crime family, but are right now the #1 crime family in LA. They launder money through the studio system, and they the head of Starlight Studios, a fictional, obviously, movie studio. And the Boyles are are more old school. They are about sort of that old school street honor system, and their power mostly derived from the police, which they have their payroll, and local businesses. And so there's all that politics back and forth between them, and even like with this, with the introduction of a serial killer, each family, and this is what I think is really cool that people will love. Part of them is thinking, "Oh, we got to find this guy." Another part of them is thinking, okay, how can we use this introduction of this killer to our political advantage in the city? And that's what's really interesting, to have that back and forth going on, along with, just the true mystery and the very personal journey that Lawrence and Lucas go on to solve this mystery of these as the bodies start piling up.
Okay. Yeah, I do like the art and the fact that they pinned the badge onto his chest.
Yeah.
So that is the art that we shared. I really think that for those that are listening at home, it's definitely worth pulling this up on the video and checking out the art, even if you do the rest of it just listening in the audio, or you come back to it to check out the art. I think it's really good. It gives you a taste of what you can expect. So what can you tell us? Obviously, the detective is iconic in that, like, he's one of the first black detectives in 1920s LA. Or even if it's not LA proper, an LA stand-in.
Right.
Is it actual Los Angeles, or did you give it a new name?
It's actual Los Angeles, yeah.
Okay. So the City of Demons is a play on the fact that Los Angeles is the City of Angels, but they're not, which I think is cool.
Yeah, no, on the surface level, it's definitely a play on that. And it's also just that, also just the darkness that you find within, like, the city's infrastructure, especially at that time, specifically the Hollywood system. It has Hollywood forever and ever and ever, and this is what the comic touches on. Has such reckless, and you could almost call it demonic sort of way of dealing with power struggle between like a lot of the more powerful men, specifically a lot of the women that in Hollywood. So it touches on that, and it's, again, I think people are going to be really wrapped up in mystery because it's as much about modern Hollywood as it is about Hollywood during that time period.
Did you cover so this is during the Prohibition era, which ran from 1920 to 1932, 33? I can't remember which of those two years.
Yeah,
it ended then. So you had the speakeasies and all of that underground culture, because only the people that were too poor to have connections didn't drink booze back then.
Right, and so exactly. So in issue 3, I start off in a flashback to a big party for a movie premiere, and there's alcohol all over the place. And one of my friends was like, "Oh, was this Prohibition?" I'm like, "Yes, but if you were rich, there really was no Prohibition for you." So.
Well, even if you were poor and you had connections, you could get moonshine. But I mean, it was you lost the ability to get high quality alcohol.
Yeah,
that's where the expression "bathtub gin" came from, right? Like, people would make stuff up on their own. Whether or not that was good, separate issue.
Yeah,
I've had some moonshine that was actually tasty, and I've had some stuff where did I just drink battery acid?
Dude, the moonshine I had was this is the worst thing ever. It's like battery. Oh my gosh.
I drank some that was so smooth, I thought I was drinking water, and I've drank other stuff where I'm like, is this battery acid? Did I just commit to a self-deletion via beverage? Right. So it's one of those things where it's hit or miss. They either get it right or they don't. But yeah, so you do cover the speakeasy era, and that's the other thing that people don't realize is the Prohibition era gave us NASCAR, but it also largely gave us the mob.
Because those mafia organizations were already there. All it did was really strengthen it 10 times. So
they brought their profits up.
Yeah, it brought their profits up to it. Again, they were already there and for a while, but they were nowhere near as powerful or as widespread in their power grapple as ever before. Yeah, because
they weren't purely crime organization. I mean, they did commit the crimes, right? But they also were, Little Italy, Little Germany, whatever, where all the waves of immigrants came. They were sort of local boys looking out for their own. So yes, they did the crimes and they shook people down, but they also looked out for their neighbors that were of the insert, whatever group they were part of.
For the neighbors they liked.
Right. So like, you know,
Yeah.
the Germans looked out for the Germans, the Italians looked out for the Italians, the Chinese looked out for the Chinese, you know, the Irish looked out for sometimes the Irish. Right. But it was like, it was more than what we think of it today.
Right.
But that means there's also, and so they had actual rules, like, you know, back in the day, not to say it didn't happen. I won't romanticize it to that degree, but they, as a general rule, they tried not to go after the women and the children. Right.
Children, definitely not. Women were.
Women's a little trickier because there were some women that were involved, so they were not off limits. But as a general,
that's what I was thinking of. Yeah,
a female civilian that wasn't involved, they not just again stuff happened, but it was discouraged from a cultural angle within the organization.
Yes, yeah, I agree with you there.
And so if you're murdering women and children in the district of the mafia, if it's not sanctioned by them, they're definitely coming after you.
Right.
And if it is sanctioned by them, generally speaking, it's not just the run of the mill stuff. You're connected to someone, right?
Right.
And so it was a different era of crime. And like I said, compared to the nowadays, crime seems a lot of times more randomized. As a general rule, back then there was the air of civility about it. And again, as a historian, I know that some of that's hyped up. It's that remembering the past through rose-colored glasses, like that happens. So I'm trying to tread lightly, but it does give you interesting themes that you can cover for a comic book set in that era,
Well, yeah, and one thing that I just, one of the reasons I wanted to make the comic in the first place was because there was no other comic like it. I think it's rare you get a comic that's completely set in like a very grounded, very, very grounded reality, and that, and when talking about this comic, it may sound pretentious to some, but like I see comics as potentially a greater form of literature than like a lot of novels, because I think comics, with it being so visual, there's more emotional immediacy there. And so, like when approaching the comic book, it was like approaching like quote unquote true true like literature, because I see comics as literature. That can, at times have as much value as like a great American novel or something. Like read Watchmen, right?
Yeah, and we try to be medium inclusive. So like we don't just, if you're reading, I don't care if you're reading a comic book or a novel or a manga or whatever.
Right.
Like there's room for everyone. My only problem, generally speaking, with comics is the price, because a lot of times, like, if you read fast, like that comic book you just spent $10 for, you might finish it in 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're looking at it price per hour, it gets really pricey. But
yeah,
I don't know. There's generally speaking, like people that are into that know that, right?
But
like
for $5, you can get you can get a really good read, City of Demons issue 1.
How much are you selling for? So
$5. Yeah,
it is $5. Okay.
Yeah.
Is that for a digital version, or is that? I'm assuming
that. So that's for $5 specifically is for physical.
Okay. So the for people that are getting the physical, is it at any point in time are you going to do the hardbound omnibus version down the line if they wanted it for their bookshelf?
100%.
Okay.
Yeah. So it'll be about like, I think when it's all said and done, it'll be I think right around 240 pages. So yeah, 100%. And it's a 12-issue miniseries. So it's from start to there's a clear beginning, middle, and end. So there will be 100% like a graphic novel version of it, which I think is honestly probably better suited for. But I think again, there's a certain quality of reading it issue by issue, month by month, that you can't get just by having the whole graphic novel there. I think there's anticipation, especially with a mystery story. I think it's a really cool experience. It almost feels like you're finding out more about the mystery as the characters do. I think there's a really special element to that.
So what is the issue turnaround going to be like? Are you going to do one a month? Is it going to be one a week? Like how? I don't know your process, where you are with it.
So we are trying right now. So before the first issue is even released to the public, and right now this is what we're in the middle of, we are creating or producing 8 issues. And once we've created 8 issues, we are going to send off issue 1, and it will be our intention is to make it a monthly release.
Okay, so you have 8 months to get, you know, episode 9, 10, 11, and 12,
right?
You know, done, or at least to the point where you can join the cycle.
Exactly, and
okay.
Yeah, so I think, and I know JR sent you I think the PDF links to the first 2 issues. I'm excited to hear your thoughts because I think you're really, really, really going to like it. I can confidently say that. I think you're really going to like it, and I think Kingsley, myself, and Nikki were making something actually really special, and just because like I don't want to jinx it, but I think people are going to be sold come issue 1. Like we're just very confident what we're doing, and talking to the whole team, we're all like just absolutely like in love with what we're doing, and that's just been phenomenal. And like I look at this almost as more fun time than just work, and that's when you know you're like, oh, you're doing something right. Most times.
Yeah, I mean, if you're having fun, hopefully the readers will have fun. So, when you release, you're going to be selling obviously on the publisher's website, which is what we're linking to. Right now, it's up for pre-order. It will be releasing next year, correct?
Yeah, March. So it will be released March of next year. And so yes, you're correct. And so it will be selling through my publisher. My publisher. Again, being published through Blood Moon Comics, and so they've been great to work with. But yeah, I'm selling it through them, and they'll distribute it to, they're through Diamond as well, and so it will be at probably any comic book shop that also sells small press comics. So any comic book shop, like I know one near me actually does not, but I know others that do. And so any comic book store that also sells small press comics, you will most likely find City of Demons there as well.
Nice. So are you doing any merch that you're going to be selling? Because sometimes like
we are creating.
You've got the branded Gentleman Club like matchbooks. You could use that to fake ads or all kinds of cool things.
Right. So we are creating right now. Still trying to segment off some of the budgeting for that. But right now we are talking about finally again, because the issue is off for until like March. But we are right now looking at the budget for posters. People love stickers, which kind of surprised me. I'm not a big sticker guy, I guess. But I was doing some stickers for that. Yeah, and also the JR. I had not thought about the matchbook, but honestly, that'd be kind of sick. So.
Yeah, I was just thinking more like the logo for that, because that's that company exists. Like, make it almost like go for a period ad look, where it's like a poster where you're getting an ad for this fictional company. I mean, look how many people wear the Dudler Mifflin T-shirts for a company that never existed. That was on a show that watched a decade ago. And the other cool part about merch is it's making it, even just if you just put the book cover in, like, what are you reading? Like, print on demand has made merchandising so accessible to the average, small producer that there are options if you're creative enough.
Well, yeah, you're 100% right. There are so many options for any of this kind of stuff. Even something like just, it's always funny, like hear like older people talk about, even just print something on a T-shirt. Now it's like super easy. It's super quick. Yeah. It's relatively, depends on who you go with. Well, it depends on multiple factors, but relatively speaking, not horribly expensive if you budget for it. And it's just all that kind of stuff. What we're still trying to do, at least on our sides for City of Demons, our focus, and I'll be honest, is again, right now, and we prioritize it has to be getting these 8 issues done, right? And again, right now we're still budgeting for some of that stuff. What exactly we'll do, we would almost, I'm like 90% sure we would do stickers. Posters, 100%.
And if you go print on demand, you can use some of the existing art too, and just do a layout over the art, which is kind of gives you some flexibility for the lower tier options. Like obviously stickers, generally speaking, they don't do that print on demand. You have to buy runs, I think.
Yeah. Oh yeah, they force your hand at that. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, there's some of it like you could print the cover on a mouse pad if people still use mouse pads. I don't know. I don't, but
I know.
maybe
I don't think many people do.
But I mean, like you could, when you upload the image, like you can, generally speaking, like if you load it up to Teesprings or was it? I don't know. Well, there are companies like that out there. I don't even know what's out there anymore. But like you can upload the image, and then you could, the consumer's like, oh, I want this on a mug versus a T-shirt versus. Yeah. You don't have to limit it.
Well, that's cool. No, exactly. You're 100% right, and I love that merch. See, the merchandising thing. I'm gonna be honest. It's just like when you're making a comic. It's. I think it's easy for a lot of people to go, okay, made a comic. Thank goodness, I was lucky enough to get a publisher. Whew. And then you're like, oh wait, I still have to market this thing.
Right.
You're like, oh man. And so like
I saw at a con once that I've only gone to a couple because I'll go to smaller ones if I can, because I don't deal with crowds very well. But like the lady was writing children's vampire stories, like for young readers, like middle grade. And her husband was a carpenter, so as his spare time when they were watching family movies or whatever, he was literally whittling like little stakes that he would make as like earrings or like merch that she could give away, because the wood was scrap from his business. So now he can write this off, and like he's making little vampire hunting stakes as merch because he's just getting creative. Like you can do so much if you've got like skills outside of just the drawing and the writing. Speaking of, any plans to like write novels or any other form of media in this universe?
In this universe, you mean like in City of Demons continuity, or just? Yeah.
So in the world that is City of Demons, maybe follow a different detective for those novels.
I don't know. Again, we're still writing City of Demons as we talk. So my focus is really just getting this series.
Absolutely, this is down the line. Big picture thinking.
Yeah, big picture. Probably not. I think again, City of Demons to me there's a very clear. It's the miniseries. It's only 12 issues, so it's a clear beginning, middle, and end. Short 12 issues. Maybe honestly, like I won't say I haven't thought about it. I would be open to doing it. My only question, like with a sequel, is I don't know what more there could.
That's kind of hard to do,
right? That's like worth anyone's time,
right?
I could do something. I mean, I have considered doing a spin-off of one of the main characters, almost doing like a prequel, which I think actually there's a story. I think there's a story there that'd be really interesting. Yeah, I don't know, but I don't. Yeah, but again, the only real thing would be probably a prequel spinoff of one of the main characters.
So you talked about the main characters are the detective and the private eye.
Yeah.
And you almost need a private eye to be a noir story.
Yeah.
Were there any secondary characters that were in this novel or this collection of comics that you like a lot, that speak to you? Like maybe they're not a main character, but they're kind of cool.
Yeah. Again, I have nothing in common with this guy, but the head of the Boyle crime family, who's the rival to the Sullivan crime family, is a guy named Harry Boyle, and old school kind of believes in the old school street honor stuff. And I think he's so interesting because his moral compass to him is very black and white, but yet he operates in a very gray underworld, and where in many cases he himself is just from an objective point of view in the black side of objectivism, and so of that moral compass. And so I think the way he views himself as just a very clear a businessman who at times maybe delays his hands a little bit, I think so fascinating to dive into. And I think for him to be that kind of emotionally, again, in a lot of ways, a psychopath, to be that emotionally dejected or unattached from certain very dark stuff in the business speaks to, really it speaks to what kind of person it takes to operate successfully in that atmosphere. and I think he's a fascinating character to write about. It's really just writing a very polished psychopath who views himself as not being that way. He views himself as almost as being probably the most normal, refined person there is in the world of of mafia politics. And I'm just going to add in a second character. The flip side of that is there's this mother character, Marcus Sullivan's mother, who is her husband was the former head of the Sullivan crime family before he was murdered, and so she helps guide her son through the politics of the various mafias and the politics of the Sullivan family itself. And she is such a calculated character that I think she's so fun to write because she knows the ins and outs of everything, and she knows how to operate this world that Marcus is still kind of learning. And she is the one that really teaches Marcus to build up the playboy mystique, because she knows it's better for your enemies to underestimate you. And I think that's so fun.
Okay. Was there anything that we didn't cover that you think the listeners should know before we wrap this up?
Buy it. No, I think, again, for people listening, look, if you like a great mystery to follow, and you love period pieces that also deal with 1920s LA, 1920s Hollywood, again, very character driven. That's what I really want to press. Character driven. That characters I think you quickly find yourself liking and find yourself just finding interesting. I think this is a great story for you. I don't know anything else on the market that is going to be quite like it.
Okay. This is a part of the interview, dear listener, dear viewer at home, where I remind you to please be kind and speak your mind on the reviewing platforms. Your reviews help the right readers find the right books, so do your part. It really does make a difference. Speaking of reviews, you weren't sure yet if the publisher is going to release it to like Drive-Thru Comics or any of those places yet, but you're definitely selling it on his website. Is there going to be anywhere on the website where you could leave reviews, or are they going to be stuck going to outside platforms for a little bit?
It's good. That's the first time anyone's ever asked me that. That's a really good question. Well, then, I think it's going to be stuck to outside platforms for now. We've got to. I've sent the comic, the first 2 issues, off for some advanced reviews, and which have been very positive, and those are all straight on. I'm playing third-party extensions.
Okay. With that, where can listeners and viewers find you guys? Find the City of Demons.
So we're on Facebook, Twitter, X, whatever, and Instagram. It's if you just hold on a second. But yeah, so our Instagram is City of Demons _comic. And you find a lot of exclusive stuff on there. Like you can keep up with the whole production process, which I think is really interesting, really fun to keep up with the production process of the comic. And on X, I am so mad they changed the name of Twitter. But on X, it's City of Demons _CO. Why is it called CO? Because we couldn't take the word comic. So. But you'll be able to find us there for, again, other exclusive, again, different from Instagram, but exclusive content. And also on Facebook, which should just be city.of.demons.comic. And the reason why I really stress that is because there is a City of Demons Constantine comic that is also on Facebook. That I found out, and the other people found out when they're trying to find my comic. So, but again, another exclusive sort of a lot of exclusive art, exclusive content, exclusive reveals. I think people, when given the chance, are really gonna like this. And yeah, but yeah, keep up with all the social media so you can keep up with release dates, exclusive trailers, artwork. Yeah, but just hear updates on the process because I think it's very, very interesting.
Nice. So that's always the fun for some people. They like to get behind the curtains of where the creative stuff was made. So always a cool thing. You can find us, dear listener, on our Linktree, linktr.ee, Linktree/Blasters and Blades podcast. Again, Linktree/Blasters and Blades podcast. We're going to link to all the things: the BitChute, the Rumble, the YouTube, the TikTok, the Twitter. We have our email, blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. We have our Facebook group and Facebook page for the Blasters and Blade podcast. And more importantly, we have Madam Stabby Stab over there on the Instagram, Twitter, and the email. Send all hate mail her way. She likes listening. She will make you cry, but we will all laugh. So it's a win-win. And you can find our website there. It's a bunch of gobbledygook. Thank you, Spotify. But the link is there. And on that link, you can support the show for as little as 99 cents a month. You can help keep the lights on, or you can support the show more directly at buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Again, buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Be sure to put in the comment section that it is for the podcast, and I promise I will keep my co-hosts duly caffeinated. They will drink until that coffee brand coffee pours out of their eyeballs. I really got to find another orifice, but it gets weird, people, if I go too far. And with that, Podcast Grunts is the discount code. Link is in the show notes. You get 10% off and help support us when we get a little bit of a kickback. And with that, thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For my crazy co-host, I am J.R. Handley, and this was the Blasters and Blades podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time, where we'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom. Thank you for coming on, Parker. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right, and with that, people,